on the highway at 180, doesn't that mean that if you have a liberty, I should be free to do that, right? So, is there a law that says you can't speed on the highway?
Yes.
And doesn't it take away your right to liberty?
Yeah.
And therefore it is
No.
invalid. Right? If you follow the bouncing ball, folks, I've led you down this path for a reason. You realize there's a big problem there. Because how many laws take away people's rights to liberty? How many? All of them, right? That's what they do. So, according to what I've said so far, all laws are no good. And you realize that cannot be the case. Hold that thought. Security of the person has been primarily interpreted to be the security of a person's physical body. How does a government interfere with your physical body? What do they do?
You cannot commit suicide.
No, the government has to take away your right to have your physical body secure. How does the government interfere with your body? What do you call that, folks? Torture. Right? Isn't torture interfering with your body? Right? Making you so you can't breathe, whacking you with a lash. And this has been interpreted to at least mean that. Not all of these areas have been explored well enough that we fully understand what they are. Things are changing.
By security of the person, would that be self-defense?
It could be. Is it? I don't know. Because you only know when a judge has a case and decides. We know what the rule is. What it means, that's what judges decide. They don't make statutes, but they do strike them down when the government shouldn't have made it either. And somebody has to make a decision, and it's governments. Okay? 8, you don't have to worry about. Search. 9 is a detention right. 10 is a right on arrest. That should not affect business people unless you're getting into businesses like Breaking Bad does. You shouldn't have to worry about arrest rights, so I don't teach them. And 11, same thing, charges in criminal process. So it has to do with the rights upon being charged and being dealt with as a criminal. I don't explain these in this course because they're not really business related. Okay, they're more criminal codes type stuff. But 12 is fairly interesting. It's the right to be protected against cruel and unusual punishment. What would you say might be a punishment that we've had or might have had in the past that you'd say that'd be cruel or unusual? Give me an example of something you might have heard of or done. And you say that's kind of cruel or unusual.
Solitary confinement.
Maybe, right? That could be cruel. It's mentally finishing. That could be cruel. Cutting off people's body parts. Cut off your hand if you steal. Probably cruel and unusual. The lash. Right? Whipping somebody or caning them, which is just a painful thing. Did we talk about caning? Um, 13, you don't have to worry about. It's about not having to give incriminating testimony. It's basically a right to remain silent. 14, not particularly important. It's a right of an interpreter. 15 is kind of important. It's equality. The right to be treated equally under the law. And those, folks, are the rights. These are the rights that the government cannot take away. They are delineated. The list is complete. There are no other rights that you have the right to. And I'm going to deal with something now because I don't want you to become confused. This is about what governments can and can't do. It has nothing to do with what individuals have to do. Individuals have to follow a different set of rules. It's called human rights. Human rights apply to you. You cannot break other people's human rights. This is not human rights. This is what we call charter rights. Charter rights are part of the Constitution. It's about what governments can and can't do. So sometimes people think that you have to abide by these rights. You can't take... This isn't about what you do and don't do. It's about what governments can and can't pass laws about. And you people can't pass laws, so it doesn't apply to you. All right. You ready? I'm going to try and teach you this by going through some facts. Okay? What if? And I want you to try and understand this. Ready? Okay. What if I want to worship trees? I think trees are a being, they're connected, they're sacred, and I want to worship them. What if the government passed a law saying you can't worship wood? What would happen to that law? Court would strike it down. It's taking away my right to religion. Right? And therefore, I can go worship the tree god as much as I want. And are you okay with that, folks? If I want to worship trees?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's say that I want to be a Rastafarian. A Rastafarian. I want to practice Rastafaria and worship Ra. Should I be allowed to worship Ra if I want to worship Ra? What do you think, folks?
Yes.
How does a Rastafarian worship Ra?
Smoking marijuana.
What? Herbal? What type of herb?
Marijuana.
So, remember when marijuana smoking was illegal? Remember that? The good old days I refer to them as? Right? And let's say that you are practicing Rastafarian 10 years ago. So you're walking down the street, right? And this is something students taught me. I didn't know what this was. And you're about to light up a blunt. See, that's my lingo to show how cool I am. I never knew what a blunt was. How many of you know what a blunt is? How many of you don't? What's a blunt, folks?
Very large joint.
It's a large marijuana cigarette. And marijuana was illegal in Canada. So you're walking along, about to light up your blunt, right, with your reggae music going on, and the police come along and they go, "Get up against the car, long hair." Can they prosecute you for practicing your religion?
No.
But what about the fact that marijuana is illegal? Which trumps, my right to religion or the law? My right to religion, folks. You cannot make laws that take away my right to religion. If you try to prosecute me for doing that, that case will get struck out as being offensive to my right of religion. Do you see how this works? Right? Because you cannot pass laws that have the impact of taking away my right of religion.
But then would you have to have proof saying that that is your religion?
Yeah.
Or would you just say that?
No.
this is my
You
religion?
can't say, "Oh God, here come the cops, let's become Rastafarians quick." Right? And this deals with evidence. You've got to take these facts as being proved. If we deal with how do you prove it, we have to go to a completely different dimension, which has to do with how do you prove facts. I don't want to deal with how to prove facts. I want to deal with how, if these facts are the facts, what happens when we apply law to them. Okay? So if you are, and you really are, a Rastafarian, and you're walking down the street, and the police, they will not be able to prosecute you for that. Okay? What if I want to worship the chicken god?
Do it.
Do it.
Should be able to. Yay, chicken. So what that means is every full moon, I've got to go and stand naked under that full moon and cut the blood of a chicken and cover myself with it as it dies. There's a visual you're not getting out of your head for a while. All right, so if I want to do that, how many of you say, that's a right, that's a religion. If that's your religion, we're not going to take away that right. Even though we don't like it, maybe don't like killing chickens and things, that's not the question. Are you with me on this so far?
Yeah.
All right? So, let's say that I want to be an Inca and I want to worship the sun god. Should I be allowed to be like an Inca and worship the sun god?
Yes.
That's my religion. That's what I want to do. So, how did the Incas worship the sun god? They did. They found a virgin and they took her up on the mountain and they killed her. So I want you to imagine that here I am, virgin in hand, going up the mountain, if I could find one, right? A virgin on the hand, going up the mountain, and the police come along and they say, hey, what are you doing with that virgin? And I said, take her up the mountain, kill her. This is up against the car, long hair. No, this is my religion, I have a card. Oh, go ahead.
But it goes against
But it was not over life.
Oh, yeah, thank you for falling into that trap. So she says, as some of you were thinking and a few of you were saying, but doesn't she have a right to life? What does the Constitution do? Go back to basics, folks.
Well, that's what a government can and cannot do.
Does it limit what Murray can and can't do?
No.
You cannot say Murray has to grant a right to life. What you have to do is say governments can't pass laws that take away my right. And my right is a right to religion. So, do we have a problem here?
Yes.
Yes.
All of a sudden, no more virgins. Right? Up the mountain we go. Do you think that we're going to do that?
No.
No. This is where section 1 comes in. Did you notice we skipped section 1? We started at 2? You notice that?
No.
You didn't even notice that?
No.
The government realized that, yeah, we want society to be like this, but these rights are not absolute rights that you always get. And they recognize that we can't allow people to, for example, kill in the name of their religion and say, it's our religion, you can't stop me. So what section 1 does is it says, you only get that right if society accepts that you should have it. And what you have to recognize is society generally supports people's rights. In borderline situations, they will tend to favor, give them the right. So, in my example, if I want to worship the chicken god, maybe you don't like me killing chickens. Maybe you're kind of a chicken lover from a way back. And I'm going to do that. You're going, I don't like. But is society going to accept removing my right to kill a chicken in the name of my religion? The answer is probably not. Because we believe in freedom of religion, right? And if I say that I want to smoke a little ganja underneath my bed on Tuesday nights and worshiping my raw, right? You're going to say, yeah, smoke your dope. Who cares, right? Just don't come to class like that and try and teach us. And I didn't tonight. Okay, last night. Okay, no. So that's okay. We're not going to think. But if does society accept one human being killing another in the name of their religion? Will society grant that right? No way. So the circumstances in which society will take away the right is are going to be clear. Okay? They're the obvious ones, and that's an obvious one. So the rights, you get them, but if society says in these circumstances you can't have that right, we're going to take it away, you lose it. Sometimes people misunderstand Section 1, and they treat it as the wrong question, which is, the wrong question is, does society like the law? That is asked backwards, and it's not right. Because there's many things that society likes the law, but they don't want people's rights taken away. So you might like the law that prevents me killing chickens. And if you ask that question, you'll probably get to the wrong answer, which is Section 1 will remove that. The question is, does society accept the removal of that right? Those are not the same thing. So, does anybody know what peyote is? Yeah. Anybody had any? I was at a ceremony once in which peyote was distributed. Peyote is what? What is it, folks?
Plant.
Okay, what's it do?
Hallucinogen.
Yeah, so it causes you to have strange hallucinations, part of Navajo culture, right? And it's illegal because it's like LSD, it's an hallucinogen. You're not allowed to have it, right? So where did I get it from? Well, I went to a ceremony at Swan Lake First Nation, and they had a bunch of it there. And it was part of the ceremony, and you were supposed to consume some of this stuff, and I did, right? And good guest, right? I was a very good guest. I took the drugs, right? When they offered them to me. And the interesting question is, how did they get there? Because it's illegal. So what happened was, and you can't get them, they're not made in Canada, right? They're down from the desert, the Navajo desert, stuff like that. They're part of traditional, but First Nations culture and spiritual beliefs are sometimes somewhat transportable. So sometimes the Navajo culture will come up here, and maybe something will go down there. There's movement amongst these. And what was a cultural thing from the Navajo down in southern United States became part of the practice in Swan Lake First Nations. And how did they get there? Well, what happened is the guy drove across the border, had them in this car, and they said, "Can we look in the trunk?" And they said, "Sure." And they open up the trunk and they find all this peyote, and they go, "Up against the car, long hair." And he goes, "No, I got the card." "Oh, you got the card?" "Yeah, here's the card." And the card says, "This is part of my traditional culture, and I'm carrying these drugs." And they go, "Oh, here you go, away you go, off you go, have a nice time." And that's because they cannot take away a right to practice a religion. So the laws about this go aside when it's part of a traditional religious belief. Okay? All right, now I'm going to talk to you now about some real cases, not my own made-up chicken god stuff, okay? These are real cases. And I'm going to let you know, some of these cases are not very pleasant. They deal with subject matter that some of you may find offensive or uncomfortable. And I apologize for that, but it's pretty important you understand these. And some of these cases are fairly important in what they do. So the first one is particularly offensive. It's going to deal with a guy whose name is Robin Sharp. And Robin Sharp lived in BC, and he was a pedophile. He was a guy who his whole being revolved around sex with children. This is what he was, okay? And it was part of who he is and what he did. I don't know whether he actually performed improper acts, but he had images and writings and correspondence that all dealt with this. He was part of a community that this was important to. And one day the police found out about him, and they raided his house. And they found what is, under the criminal code, child pornography. There were pictures on the computer. There was writings that he had sent to other people. There was communication back and forth. And there was a bunch of these things that they found in various stages or media. And one of them that they found in his bureau was a journal that he used to sit in a chair and write out, talking about all the things he wants to do with kids. And this became part of what he was prosecuted for having. And just so that there's no doubt, and we're not going to argue about the facts, this journal, what was being described in there, would definitely fall under the heading of child pornography. And Robin Sharp was a pretty vile individual, not just because of this. His whole character was just atrocious, okay? And he actually couldn't get a lawyer to defend him because he was so rude and disgusting and slimy that no one could even deal with him, right? So he had to go to court by himself. And he was sophisticated enough to make an argument about that journal. What argument did he make?
It's a right of thought.
Are these thoughts?
Yeah, you just put on paper.
Do we prosecute people for what they think?
No.
Should he be prosecuted for what he thinks? Or is this different? What's different?
Yeah, pictures.
We're not going to talk about those. Okay? He got prosecuted for all that stuff. Separate. We're just talking about what he sat in the chair and wrote in this book. And it was disgusting.
The society doesn't accept it.
Hold that for a minute.
Would that not be creating child pornography?
What?
Would that not be creating child pornography?
Oh, yeah.
In a sense, yeah.
Well, and that's what he was charged. Possession of child pornography was the charge.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And he said, you can't charge me for this. But you say it's different because what?
He wrote it down.
So this was the first argument that was made. This is not just your thoughts. You wrote them down. Right? And the response to that was, that's just how you know what my thoughts are. What am I thinking right now, folks? Can you know my thoughts?
No.
Good thought, bad thought? So he said, look, this is just, it's certainly in a written form, but that does not change what it is. It just allows you to prove what I thought. They're still my thoughts.
Persecute.
What?
Then you can persecute him. because of
So,
thoughts.
do you see that? And that was accepted pretty easily. Is that, of course, if this right has any meaning, it can't mean we're going to prosecute you for what we can see in your head when we can finally see into your head. When we start talking with our minds, you're going to get this right. And before that, you won't have it. Right? So if it has any meaning today, it has to mean your observable thoughts. And that's what that was. And the judge said, yeah, it's a thought. It's a written form, but it's still just a thought. And what they said was, it wasn't a behavior, it wasn't a plan. That's very important. It wasn't a plan. It was just an imagination, which is your thoughts. So the judge said, yeah, it's thoughts. So where do we go?
Society.
Does society accept
No.
that you should be allowed to have these thoughts? And what's your answer, folks?
No.
So what are those bad thoughts then?
Intentions
So
are-
apparently child pornography is a bad thought. What else is a bad thought then? What else are you going to get prosecuted for? Thinking. What?
Killing somebody.
So if you even think of killing somebody, you should be prosecuted for that? What do you mean no?
No.
Okay?
Planning.
No, planning is going to be different. Planning is clear. We're talking about what are you not allowed to even think in our society. Where is their thought police? What was that thing about thought police we said? What did you people go? What was that?
No.
No thought police. No, I got it. And now you say, okay, but wait a minute, I don't like that thought. So I'm going to have thought police for that one. And if they're going to have thought police for that one, What else? Because that can't be the only one, right?
Tax evasion.
Thought of tax evasion? God, I've thought about that lots of times. Okay? In fact, I'm continually thinking of that, right? They take 50% of my money. Does that make me a bad person? I pay my taxes. I declare my income, but I think about it. Right? You people were pretty adamant about no thought police, but now you want thought police. Why? Because you don't like the thought. Can you do that? Can you start picking and choosing the thoughts that are okay and what aren't? And if you do, where does it end? If you're thinking of voting for the NDP government, up against the Carlong here, right? Where does it end? Because you can't have some thought police. Either they exist or they don't. And one of the things that I think was important in this case was Robin Sharp was charged with about 9 things. Stuff on his computer, correspondence he had with other people, images that he had up on his bulletin board. I don't know what was all there. And this was only one charge, the journal. Did the judge need it to send him away for a long, long time? No. And if you don't need it, because I've read the case, that judge said, I don't want to open this door. This is a door that once we open, we can never close. Once we say that there is some thoughts, we have thought police. And you will not have freedom of conscience anymore. And where will it end? Once I open it, we have a precedent, and it doesn't end. And I think that part of it is, I don't have to open it. But he still had to rule on whether or not this was an infringement of his right to prosecute him, and he said it was. And the journal was tossed. Which takes us to the next piece. Hold it for a second. That's what Section 33 says.
Oh. Oh.
Legit.
So if you read it and understood it, then you should be putting the initials underneath it, which I think would be... So you're going to go, there's got to be a trick here, right? Because why have these if the government can take them away? Right? So they can't, but they can? That doesn't make any sense. I must be holding something back. There's got to be more to this than this, and there is. Okay, that's good. There are 2 hurdles that the government has to get over. Now, what do you think, folks? Are these going to be hard hurdles or easy hurdles for the government to get over?
Probably pretty hard.
One would hope, right? Because otherwise, what's the point of all this? So the first hurdle is this. They have to state that they're doing it. It can't be a secret. It can't be hidden. They've got to say, yeah, we're removing this right. Is that hard for government to do? Just taking away this right?
No.
Just put it in the statute. Taking away the right. Done.
It goes against
Okay, wait a minute. There's another hurdle.
Oh.
Thank God, eh? They can only do it for 5 years. At a time. They can renew it. But each time they do it, there has to be a thing in here saying, if it isn't renewed, it dies. The removal of the right will die within 5 years. Is that hard for them to do?
No.
No. So we have a very interesting situation here where we have two fairly simple hurdles for the government to get over, and they can do whatever they want.
What do you mean? They can take it away for 5 years, and then if they don't continue to take it away, back, or?
Yeah. Remember, we're talking about removing a right. You've got to keep this in mind. You've got to see what's happening here, okay? So let me just show you this, okay? If the government said, can I have your name again?
Josh.
Josh. Josh, I don't want to be too personal, but what religion would you say that your background is closest connected to?
Christianity.
Okay, so if we said, the government says we're going to ban Christianity. Have they said they're doing it?
Yes.
Okay, and we're going to take away your right to religion. Let's be really clear. Okay? And that ban of Christianity has to have a deadline. That removal of that right can't go more than 5 years. So we're in 2019. In 2024, the right comes back. Unless we pass another law in 4 years and ban it for another 5. So it's an automatic. If nothing is done, the right comes back. Why is it 5 years, folks? Why isn't it 8 years or 3 years? Because if you really don't like it, society can vote that government out. How many times do you think this has been used? No, it has been used. It has been used more than once.
Or which right?
Are you what?
Which right?
Equality has been removed. And assembly has been removed. Twice. Equality was removed by Quebec. Assembly was moved by Saskatchewan. And what's really interesting is Doug Ford. Because Doug Ford said, I'm going to pass a law that screws up your right to vote. And basically removes your right to vote. Do you guys know who Doug Ford is? Who is he?
Prime Minister now, or sorry, Premier of Ontario.
Yeah, and he's got a very interesting background, right? Wasn't he a drug dealer?
Yeah.
I bought from him, right? What?
He was in office for years.
Okay, and he had a brother, Rob, who was nuttier than a pecan sandwich, right? And he had issues because he was in Toronto, and one of the things that Doug Ford said was, when I get elected, I'm going to take vengeance on the Toronto government for what they did to my brother. And what they were going to do is take 25 people and reduce it to, say, 12. So you're going to lose all these elected officials. So a bunch of you are going to be losing your jobs because we're only going to make it 12, right? And the problem was, it was in the middle of an election. The election had started. We were halfway through. It was like 2 months. And we're halfway through, and he goes, oh, by the way, I know you're halfway through this election, you're all campaigning and stuff, but I'm going to change it so that there's only 12 of you. How do you do that, right? And it was taken to court, and it was challenged, and they said, this is taking away a right, society doesn't accept it, and it got struck down. He said, fine, I'm going to use Section 33. And in fact, I'm going to use Section 33 every time the court disagrees with what I do. I'm going to use it and use it and use it. And what happens if people keep voting him in? What happens to the Constitution when you have... This was never pictured. You got to remember, folks, the politics of the day. We're talking about early 1980, which is right after 1970, which is when we had hippies, right? You know, this is... society was, pretty left-wing and thing. We never envisioned. The whole idea behind this is that society will not tolerate having rights removed. But what if they do? I mean, they voted this guy in. Right? They voted for him in. Do they accept him being a redneck and removing rights? What if they do? What happens to the rights at that point in time? This is a very interesting time. And if he gets away with doing it, what's going to happen in other places? Where will our rights be in 10 years' time? I have no idea.
No rights anymore.
It could be. If governments simply say, we're going to do whatever we want, and we'll use Section 33, we cannot stop them. Nothing anyone can do. That is the law. Okay. I need to show you a couple of other things here. I've got a fair amount of things, but a couple more cases. Okay. This is a real case. This is really what happened. I'm amending the facts a tiny bit, but it's basically right. Okay. So I want you to imagine that you lent a car to a friend of yours. Okay. You rent a car to a friend of yours, and let's say it was 2 years ago. So we get our time frame right. We have the right laws in place. Okay. So you lent your car to your friend, and he smoked a marijuana cigarette in your car. And when the marijuana cigarette was getting down to the end, it was kind of hot, right? He kind of pinched it out and dropped it on the floor. There was the smallest amount of marijuana left in the cigarette. The smallest amount you can possibly imagine. And you kind of knew that he kind of smoked open your car, but you didn't bother really checking too much. And then you went on a trip down to the States and you went around, and then you were coming back and you're coming over the border and they search your car and they find this, what's that called, by the way?
Roach.
Okay, roach. It's called a roach, okay? The end of a marijuana cigarette, a roach. Did you know that? Okay. And why did he burn his fingers, folks? Because he didn't have a roach clip, which is the little piece you use to hold the roach so you don't burn your fingers, okay? All the things you're learning at university that you take to tell your mom, right? So what happened is that they find this on the floor, and they go up against the car along here, and they charge you for having that there, okay? Here's my question. What should, and this is an opinion, your sentence be if you're convicted of that? Should. This is an opinion. What do you think would be right? Go ahead.
I was not aware of it.
You weren't aware of it, but you didn't check. We're going to call that willful blindness, and you're guilty. Okay? My question is, if you're guilty, what should your sentence be?
International traffic of drugs.
Folks, this is an opinion. Tell me what you think it should be. Somebody come up with something.
Yeah, but what are you guilty of?
You're guilty of having that marijuana cigarette in the car.
Guilty of possession of a roach with less than...
The tiniest amount you could possibly imagine.
Community service.
What? Community service, okay. Now that I have a position, I can work with it. How many of you think it should be more severe than that? This is an opinion. You can't be right or wrong. I just need to know where the class is at. How many of you say it should be more than that? Community service. Okay? All right? What do you think it should be?
I don't know, maybe to pay something else besides the community service.
A fine?
Yeah.
A fine? How much?
I don't know, 10 grand?
$10,000?
I don't know. No one will do this again.
Okay. We're going to be goose-stepping around the classroom from now on. All right. That's a little extreme. How many of you say that's a little extreme? Put it there. Okay, that's everybody. Okay, just put it that. All right. So who still thinks there should be a fine? for doing that, okay? How much would you say the fine should be? A couple $100. Are you with me on this? So aside from you, all right, how many of you think it should be more than that? Anybody? Okay, so here's the problem. In the facts that I described, the guy said, oh shit, forgot about the little bit of things. I'm guilty, he went and pled guilty, and the judge says, okay, we're going to sentence you. You are going to go to jail. How many of you think that's a little extreme? Oh, and by the way, not only are you going to go to jail, the minimum time that you're going to go to jail is 7 fucking years.
Why?
Even you. 7 years. I'm going to ask you a question. If it's uncomfortable, please don't answer. Okay, how old are you? 18. Okay. So I want you to imagine. So you're a teenager now, right? I want you people to put yourself in your... Go back to when you weren't. 11. Do you remember your 11th birthday party? No? Okay. I wasn't there, right? But, what grade would you have been in, folks? What grade? 7, 6, something like that? Who would you invite to your 6th birthday party? Okay? Now I want you to imagine that from that point in your life to today, every waking moment and every sleeping moment, in fact every frickin' moment, of every day, of every month, of every year, from when you were 11 till today, you were in jail. You could not get out of your bed and walk down the hall and go pee anymore. You were in a cell. And that's what happened. That's what happened. Because the court said that's importation. And it is. And the minimum sentence for importation is minimum. They can give you more. But the statute said 7 years. That'll teach them. So, you have to understand this. There is only one way to get around a statute. There is only one. If the facts are proven, and they are, there's only one way. And that one way, you must find that it is unconstitutional. Otherwise, you're going to jail for 7 years. What's the argument? Can you argue that the wrong government passed it? It's passed by the federal government, criminal offense. Is that the wrong government?
No.
Then that's this whole area done. What do you argue?
Who's responsible for import laws?
Federal government. And it's a crime. It's not really, but it's close enough for our purposes.
The right to be protected from cruel and unusual punishment.
How many people say sending someone to jail in those facts is cruel and unusual punishment? How many of you think that that's a valid argument? Okay. Does society accept removing your right to be protected in these facts? They want you to have that. They think you should be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment? You people are society. You were shocked when you found that out, right? Do you accept having the right removed in those circumstances? What's the answer? No, you don't. And therefore, when they didn't use Section 33, that law got struck down. I don't know what the guy got. But the judge no longer has to send you to jail for 7 years. They still can. They just don't have to, because that part of the law got removed because it was unconstitutional. True case. We're out of time. I'm going to talk to you about some more true cases I'm going to ask you where the heck do we talk about, and you're going to ask about Quebec and the religious symbols. That's what you're going to tell me when I ask you where we're at, okay? Quebec and the religious symbols. Okay? Just a couple things we have to do. We're going to finish this up, and then we're going to go back and deal with something different. So we move up the ladder. If anybody has any burning questions, I'll answer them now. Feel free to go. Go ahead.
If that person in jail for 7 years, how about his friend?
How about what?
How about his friend who borrowed the
They
No.
didn't bring the marijuana
so
across
they're just
the border.
afraid?
That's what importation is. It's bringing it across the border.
我想想，新加坡家
太严格了。
不要移过来了，中国还是更